Before we can start finding the circumference of circles, we need to review a few important vocabulary words about circles. The first word that I want to go over is center. The center of a circle is in the middle, and it's an equal distance from any point on the edge of the circle. So this point right here is known as the center. The diameter is the distance across the circle from one edge to the other edge, and it has to cross through this center point. So if I draw a line from this edge of the circle here through the center point all the way to the other edge of the circle, this is known as the diameter. Another word that we need to know about is the radius. The radius goes from the center of the circle to the edge of the circle. So from the center out to the edge here, and this is known as the radius. Now I'd like you to notice that the diameter goes all the way across the circle from the center through the center, and the radius goes from the center just to one edge. So that means that if you were to compare a diameter and a radius together, the diameter would be twice as long as the radius, because from here to here is one radius, and from here to here is the radius again. So that means the diameter is twice as long as the radius, or you could think of it as the radius is half as long as the diameter, because the diameter goes from the edge to the center all the way to the other edge. So if I were to make this blue line into a diameter, I'd have to draw another line over here that would also be a radius. The last word that we need to know about is the distance all the way around the outside edge of the circle is known as the circumference. And it's just a fancy word for perimeter. In other words, it's the distance around the outside edge of the circle. If you were to walk around the outside edge of this circle, you would travel the circumference of the circle. The last thing that you need to know about is the relationship between the circumference and the diameter. If you were to take the circumference, which we usually abbreviate with the letter C, and were to make it into a ratio or a fraction by comparing it to the diameter, which we usually abbreviate D, this ratio, no matter how big or small your circle is, will always equal the same thing. And if you divide those two things, you're going to get a special number known as pi. And pi, I'm sure you've heard about, is equal to 3.14, and it goes on and on and on forever, and it's what we call a non-terminating decimal. In other words, it goes on and on forever, and it doesn't repeat, and it doesn't have any sort of pattern to it. So this is known as pi. So if you take any circumference of a circle and make a ratio out of it compared to the diameter, that special number is known as pi. We need to use pi 3.14, which is an approximation, in order to do calculations with circles. We can also write pi as a fraction, and it's normally written as 22 over 7 if you were to write it as a fraction. So both 3.14 and 22 over 7 both are equal to pi, and pi is the ratio of the circumference divided by the diameter. Remember, the diameter goes all the way across the circle, the radius goes halfway, and the circumference goes all the way around the outside edge. I like to remind students sometimes, in order to keep the diameter and the radius straight in their head, diameter is a longer word than radius, so the long word goes all the way across the circle, and the short little word radius goes halfway. That's one way you can try to remember it.